Hello, yes, that's right. It's Joe here for Joyrider TV. Today, I've got a Nacra 570 and 500. We're going to look at how to rig the sails on these boats. And these, by the way, are the Mark II versions. All right. Okay, so the rolling spinnaker, because this boat's been used before, the spinnaker is already rolled. Now, this is actually exactly the same if it isn't already rolled. So we can see this is the head because it's quite a sharp corner. But the other thing that would tell us which the tack is that it has the sailmaker's logo there. So that is how we know it's the front bottom corner. So we're going to start off by attaching this to the furling drum. And we're not going to drop the pin or the ring in the sand. Okay, so once we've attached that, we can then attach the head of the sail. So I've just gone down the length of it, making sure there's not like a figure of 8 knot tied in the spinnaker. Okay, so that's in. We can now go about actually hoisting the sail. While I'm pulling it up, just going to make sure it's not kind of being dragged across the rigging there. Okay, so I could attach the sheets either by unrolling the spinnaker or just lowering it down a little bit. I'm going to do it by lowering it down a little bit. So just releasing the halyard there, bringing it down just so that I can reach the clue. And then what I'm going to do is put the sheets through double like this. So we've found the middle of the sheets, we've put the middle of the sheets through the eyelet, and we're now going to take the other part of the sheets through there. By attaching the sheets this way, what it means is we're not going to have a big lump at the clue of the sail, which means when we come to jibe, it's going to go across the front of the forestay much more smoothly. And then we pull that through. One of the sheets that we have is going to go on this side, and the other one is going to go to the other side. Okay, so now we can thread the sheet through the blocks. There is an arrow on the block to say which way it should go in, but you can check this by pulling a bit of pressure, and it means when you pull it in, it clicks. When you pull it backwards, it doesn't move. This is a pressure ratchet. So if we take the pressure off, it will roll freely both ways. And with pressure, click, resistance. All right, so after that one, making sure we're not tying the rope in a knot, we're then going to go up to the smaller block on the front beam. We can then pull that through. Okay, so an interesting thing with these pressure ratchets is you'll see in the sheave, there's a small hole. When you line that hole up with the top of the block, you can go in with an Allen key and adjust the amount of pressure the ratchet needs to engage. But coming from the factory, it should be absolutely perfect. But if you feel it comes on too early, just a few turns in there with an Allen key and she will be good. Okay, so the end of the sheet, we're taking across to the other side of the boat, and then there'll be an extra ring coming out from the trampoline where that's just going to go through, and then we'll tie an 8 in the end so that we know exactly where the sheet is. And of course, we're going to do that both sides, making sure that the spinnaker sheet goes over the top of everything. Nice. So the optimal tension for the halyard with the rolling spinnaker is pretty tight, but we're not really grinding it on so that the forestay goes loose. That would be too tight. So we're happy with that. And with the rolling spinnaker, we can just leave it in that position the whole time. So that's done. So the halyard can then be coiled up and put into the pocket on the trampoline. Okay, so a tip with the spinnaker halyard, because it's staying up all of the time, just to take a little bit of rope back from the pocket, and we can just tie it off there, just with like 2 hitches on the bite, and that is going to stop it from coming uncleated when you don't want it to come uncleated. So then when it comes to wanting to use the spinnaker, all we need to do is take the furling line out of the cleat. We can then pull the sail, but it might need, especially if it's new, a combination of pulling the sail and pulling the furling line. And there she is. That is as easy as it can possibly be to deploy a spinnaker. And then when we want to put it away, we can just pull the furling line. We're going to roll it until we can't roll it anymore. So we can see the sheets are getting wrapped around, but what that's actually doing is tidying up the trampoline as the spinnaker's getting rolled. So that really is a win-win to roll it up as much as that. We've also got the rope wrapped around the sail, which is going to stop any flapping from the clew of the sail. There's 2 different versions of these boats available. There's the Sport, which we're going to look at shortly, or the School, and that is what we're looking at here. The School jib has a furler here. So we're going to start off with the tack. Again, we know it's the tack because it has the sailmaker's logo there. And this is just going to go onto the flange, just at the bottom. And then what we can do next is, this jib has hanks on it, and we can hank the jib on now. So it goes on sideways and just a twist, making sure you're twisting it the right way. Otherwise you will find out, of course, as you're hoisting the sail. So that's how it wants to be. We'll twist it that way, onto the wire, one twist, we're good. Okay, last one. Okay, so now we're going to take the halyard, which is just tied off to the bridle wire there. Just checking up the forestay to make sure it's not twisted. Okay, so on the end of the wire part of the halyard, we've got a shackle. This is a captive shackle. That means the pin can't fall out. And we're going to put that onto the top of the jib, and we're going to do it so that the pin is at the back of the jib. And with the captive shackle, that just needs to be turned through 90 degrees for it to close. Okay, so what we've got, this is like a double captive shackle because it's got this pin in it as well to make sure it can't fall off. So the ring in this one at the back and the pin at the back, that is so that just if we're jibing with the spinnaker badly, we're not going to catch the spinnaker on anything sharp on the front of that shackle. So we can now pull this bad boy up. Checking the hanks as it goes up. Okay, and there she is, looking good. Okay, so this is the method of securing the halyard with the furling version. We're just going to untie the thicker line, take off what would be called the lazy line, which is just there to pull it up, making sure we don't let go of this. If you were to let go of this, well, you would have to either drop the mast or tip the boat on its side to recover the halyard. So with the end of the tensioning line, we're going to go through the roller at the bottom of the chain plate. Okay, and then it finishes off by going through the cleat on the sail. And then we want to pull this reasonably tight, but not so tight that it's taking the weight off the forestay, just so the front of the jib is just starting to flatten as we pull that tight. And then we pull it down into the cleat, and then what I'm going to do is put it through the hole in the bottom of the sail, up through the wire, because we just need to get rid of this bit of extra and then I'm just going to tie that off there. Okay, so with the sheets, we just want to make sure they're not twisted. And then another double captive shackle, take the pin out and onto the clew of the sail. All right, so to roll the jib up, we've got our furling line, and that comes back onto the front beam, and then when we pull that, and again, like we did with the spinnaker, when we roll the jib, we're going to roll it as far as we can so that the sheets are tidied up from the boat. Okay, so here we're looking at the sport jib, and the rigging here is slightly different. Everything up to the point of what we're doing with the rope end of the halyard. Okay, so the rope end of the halyard on this version, because it's not furling, it comes down to the cleat on the mast, back up to the eyelet in the wire, and then back down to the cleat on the mast. So we've got a 2-to-1 purchase system there, and then we can cleat that off. And then if we did want to adjust the tension in the jib while we're sailing, we can easily do that from here, because this is the sport. The question of the sequence in which to rig the sails. Now, because we've got furling spinnakers, I'm going to put those up first so then it's done. Then, because we've got a furling jib on the school version, I'd put that up next. Now, the difference to our sequence here is with the non-furling jib, I'd prefer to put that up last, because that's what's going to flap the most on the beach. So if we've got furling, get the furling sails up first, followed by the mainsail. If we haven't got furling, then mainsail up first and the other sails afterwards to minimise flapping. The first thing we're going to do is attach the top of the main halyard to the sail. Now, the system that this is using to lock up is a ring like this, and then at the top of the mast there's a hook. And what is going to happen is when the ring goes up the mast, it's going to slip over the hook, and that is what's going to stop it from dropping down. So all we need to do, pull the sail to the top, and that's just going to go onto the hook, thus. The other end of the halyard comes out at the bottom of the mast. So while the other person is pulling the halyard, we're just going to introduce the sail into the mast track, and on these Nacras, we've got a really nice sail feeder at the introduction of the mast track, which makes it really easy for the luff of the sail to go in. So I'm feeding it in, just making sure it's not going to get stuck, and Oliver's pulling it. Now, of course, you might not always be able to get help, and pulling the sail up alone from this position is quite awkward because you don't have any leverage. So if you need to feed the sail in and pull it up simultaneously, what we can do, we can just take some of the halyard from the mast track like this so we can get hold of it, and we're going to pull it forwards, because if we pull it backwards, this rope can go past the bolt rope, and that's going to cause you problems later on and more friction. Okay, so then I can pull the sail up from here, and I'm able to feed it in at the same time. But much easier with somebody else helping. So we've got to the top. We heard a click at the top. So to check that the sail's locked in, we're now just going to give it a little pull downwards. The sail's not coming down, so we know that the sail is now locked in at the top. Now, while we're here, let's just look at how we would unlock the sail later on. Perhaps of the whole process, that is the part that's not so obvious. So with the hoisting and the dropping of the sails, what is very important is that the boat is pointing into the wind first, because if it's not, we're going to get excessive friction and it's going to make it very difficult to either pull the sail up or down. Okay, so to pull the sail down, Oliver's just going to put a bit of tension on the halyard. I'm going to turn the mast. We can see that the sail is hanging a bit over one side, so I'm pulling the mast the other way, and now that's unhooked from the top. All right, so now that the sail is up, what do we need to do? We just need to finish it off. So we're going to feed the bottom part of the sail into the mast track. We're going to pull that down, and then to rig the downhaul, we've got a hook on each side, and that just hooks onto this webbing part on the sail, and the same the other side. With the downhaul, we're not actually going to pull it on until we're really ready to start sailing, because by pulling the downhaul on, what that does is put shape into the sail, which is kind of like switching the sail on. So until we're ready, we just want it to hang kind of like a flag without any shape. And then when we're ready, making sure it's cleated on both sides of the mast, we can then pull the downhaul on. We can see how the curve is going into the sail. And then when we've got rid of the majority of the creases in the sail, we know that is our initial downhaul setting, which would be good for light to moderate winds. The same thing when you're coming back in to the beach. It's a good idea before you get to the beach to let the downhaul off. The sail isn't going to be powered up and the boat will be much more easy to manage when you get off the boat. On a hot day, it's very important to stay hydrated whilst out on the water. A great way of doing that is to take water with you on the boat, and a great way of doing that is with the Nacra water bottle, available from Nacra. So again, to make it easier, we want to have the wind, the sail, the mast and the halyard all in a straight line to minimise friction. I'm going to feed the bottom of the sail into the mast. On the school model, it's a slightly different system. We've got a less powerful downhaul, just with one hook. So that hook is going to go into the bottom of the sail. And then we've got one cleat on the side of the mast. Now, if you have got a Nacra 500 or 570 school model with this system, and you did want to upgrade to the more powerful downhaul, the mast has already got screw threads in it to accept the new cleats for the downhaul, and the sail has already got the tags on it to attach the hook to both sides. Okay, and then with the halyard, when we're putting the halyards in the pocket, it's a good idea to coil it nicely but not tie it, because if you do need to drop the sail, perhaps in a hurry or just without having to untie a load of knots, it's better just to put it in like this. And because it hasn't been tied in a fancy way, it means it's just going to come out a lot more cleanly than if it had been tied. We're going to start off with the bottom block for the main sheet. That's the one that's got the cleat. Okay, so the shackle is going to go onto the traveller car, and then we'll just tighten that up. And with these shackles, really do it as tight as you can, but with your fingers. I wouldn't use a tool to tighten that up. Okay, so once that is on, we're just going to pull the traveller car into the middle. Okay, so it's handy to bring the traveller into the middle. That makes it really obvious what you're doing. And then we're going to work our way to the end of the main sheet. And then we'll go through the cleat, through this fair lead, then through the middle of the traveller car, and then that's going to finish off by going through the fair lead on the back beam, and then we're going to finish it off with a figure of 8 knot, and then that is how we're going to control our traveller. Now, if you find that your main sheet is quite twisted, this really needs to be sorted out before you go afloat, because it's not going to be very easy to pull in and it's not going to go out. So what we can do is, if we take the rope from the middle at the bottom and just follow that upwards, so we're following it up, and then we pull the top block through that way, then we can see all of the ropes are running as they should do, and that's going to be easier to pull in, and it will go out when you release it. Okay, so there we go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon with some more on Joyrider TV.